All right, so let's dive in. I would love, so first, welcome everyone. Glad to have you all here. This is the first of many actual learning sessions that we're hosting. And this is a partnership between Innovate Carolina and Kickstart Venture Services. We work together. We're out of the same office, and Innovate Carolina provides foundational support to a lot of different programs. We provide market research support. We provide impact measurements and metrics support, communication support, strategic programming support. So I'm kind of hesitating every once in a while because I'm admitting people as we go along. So part of that is working with programs such as Kickstart Ventures. And this is one of multiple types of engagement that we would like to start working with you on. This is a learning experience that we're trying to create for you all. As we go along, we really want it to be interactive. And as you all have questions, we'd love for you to put them up in the chat. Today's session is unfortunately going to be cut short. We were just made aware that the Chancellor has a all-hands-on meeting for staff at 12:30. So we'll be finding out at 12:30 how the fall may be kind of rolling out potentially. But Patrick is going to be providing his contact information at the very end of the slide. So the only thing that we're really cutting short on the learning experience is the Q&A, unfortunately. So he has suggested that he would be open to direct contact. So if you all have any questions about any of the content that's covered today, please feel free to reach out to him. But what we really wanted to do in this series was create a number of different learning experiences as you go through your consulting, both with the Blackstone Entrepreneurs Network and also outside of the Blackstone Entrepreneurs Network, because I know a lot of you are part of the Carolina Graduate Consulting Club. As you go through those consulting experiences, we're hoping that some of this content and some of this information will be really helpful for you to be effective in those positions. In addition to these learning experiences, we'll be connecting you up and inviting you to some pitches with startups and potential projects that roll out of those pitches. So that's the twofold piece of the program that we've been putting together. So I introduced Innovate Carolina. Maria, would you like to just broadly, just introduce yourself, Kickstart, and then we'll hand it over to Patrick for our first market research overview.
I met a few of you, but not everybody. My name is Mireya Maki, and I'm the interim director for Kickstart Venture Services, and we work with UNC startups that are based out of the research from UNC. Generally, they have some intellectual property. We work a lot with faculty members, some with grad students and others. So we're very excited of working with you in this program in partnership with the Innovate Carolina and the Blackstone Entrepreneurs Network. And again, we're here to throughout the series of training and look forward to working with you and the Kickstart startups as well. And part of my team is Haley and Judy, who are also part of Kickstart there as well.
Good. All right. So without further ado, why don't we turn it over to Patrick. And Patrick, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself prior to getting into the information and who you're with.
Yeah. I hope I'll be able to figure out my screen share situation here. But hey guys, I'm Patrick Astin. I'm part of the Innovate Carolina team. I am a market research analyst. So I essentially work with all of our innovators and entrepreneurs across campus. That includes students, faculty, and staff on primarily early stage opportunity analysis. So really helping to determine whether or not it makes sense to develop a whole lot of time, energy, and money into developing a product, service, what have you, in the first place, right? And once we kind of make that determination, if that's a go, We help look at the funding opportunity landscape to see if there's any immediate funding opportunities available. My colleague Cindy does patent landscape analysis to kind of complement the market landscape lens to see what the intellectual property landscape looks like. So that's it in a nutshell. All right, I think I'm gonna try and figure out my screen share here. Are you seeing anything yet?
Are you just hitting that green button at the bottom, Patrick? And then
Just give me 1 second. I thought I had it. Of course I didn't. I have 2 monitors, so
I figured that's what you're doing, the monitor game.
I'll figure it out. Give me just a second. All right, how's this?
That worked.
Cool. All right. So yeah, just quickly. So I'm going to be talking primarily about the secondary market landscape piece of this. I believe next week's session is going to be specifically on primary market research.
2 weeks. They're bi-weekly. Yep.
2 weeks. All right. My bad. 2 weeks. Okay. So the buttons don't work. So I guess just quickly to give you a brief kind of an idea of how these projects usually start in my interaction with students and the market research, what gets the ball rolling. So I usually meet with a student or somebody in the lab, a staff, or some other person at UNC that has a great idea for a new product or service, some kind of technology. They've done a little bit of research and they're convinced that, hey, this is the next big thing, right? But typically I'm like, well, I'm not saying that's not the case, but let's maybe take a step back and kind of look at the market landscape and kind of understand what we're dealing with here in the first place. So what I want to cover today, again, mostly secondary research in nature, but why do we even do market research in the first place? Why is it important? What does the typical process look like? Kind of the process that I follow and a lot of my colleagues in this space. And then specifically choosing the right resources. So resources that we have access to as UNC, faculty, students, staff, but also what are some great resources that are publicly available that we can use to kind of help inform our venture development process. So I took this from entrepreneur.com, but really market research. I mean, this is not rocket science, but it's really about gathering information, analyzing and interpreting the information in the context of our own ventures, our ideas. But really, we want to get a better understanding about the market, the industry itself, the kind of product services that already exist in the market and the companies that make them, as well as, and this is very important, who are our customers or beneficiaries, right? And on that specifically, what are the characteristics? What do they have in common? How do they spend money? How often do they spend money? Where are they, right? Where are my markets? And what are their needs? So, you know, why would they be willing to spend money for a type of product or service, right? If you don't need it, you're not going to buy it. So just very briefly, obviously, there's 2 ways to conduct research in general: is primary research and secondary research. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but primary is really about, you know, gathering your own information through surveys, interviews, focus groups. The good thing about that is, you know, it can be highly targeted and the results are going to be really relevant to your own venture, your product. But, you know, it tends to be a bit more expensive, time consuming, and participation rates in surveys can be a problem. Secondary research, which is what I spent most of my time doing, is really about looking at the market literature, stuff that's already been written, gathered for another purpose by another company. But, you know, the pros here, obviously, it's inexpensive. We have a lot of stuff available through UNC and in the public domain. And it's a lot faster than primary research, right? But, you know, some of the negatives here, obviously, everyone or a lot of people have access to the same type of information. So you likely won't find that one golden nugget of information you can use to your advantage, right? And I'm not saying either one is better. Primary is going to be very, very important once you start prototyping, building your actual product, iterating. But secondary research can be really, really useful, especially in the very early stages of your venture or your project, because it really can kind of make or break or really help you determine whether or not it's even worth pursuing this in the first place. So again, why do we do it? Is it worth developing? Do I invest my time, money, and energy? Sorry. May help you find potential sources of funding for further product or service development and grow your company. And also by learning more about your competition, your customers, it helps you position your product and service accordingly in the marketplace. So this is the process I tend to follow. So again, it's not rocket science, but it kind of helps outlining the steps here. First part, really, what is my research question, right? What is it that I'm trying to glean from the market research? Quick example here. Some of you may already be familiar with this. The Lean Canvas, which is used in many for entrepreneurship focused classes and programs at UNC. But really what it does, it kind of outlines the key aspects that you should focus on when you start a new business. Focuses on the key problem you're trying to solve, solution you're proposing, the key metrics and competitive advantages. So let's assume, you're working on the Lean Canvas and trying to get more information on like existing alternatives in the market, right? So how is the problem that you're trying to solve already been being addressed in the market? So this would become my research question, right? So next step, kind of think about, based on the information you're trying to find, so I want to get more information about competitors, existing companies, what are the right resources to look at? So first thing, kind of, select those and collect the data, right? So, I mean, for this piece, I would highly suggest using some kind of spreadsheet, some kind of method to keep track of both the resources and the keywords that you've used and the results. Maybe list report titles or something like that, because more often than not, if I don't keep track of it, I keep finding myself going back to the same resource, using the same keywords all over again, because I just forgot that I've used them already. Analyze the results, right? Think about what did you find, and also super important, what did you not find, right? Is it because I have to look somewhere else? Is it because it just doesn't exist? Maybe I didn't find any potential competitors or existing companies because there aren't any, right? That's entirely possible. So using the information from this part of the research can kind of help me determine what kind of questions I need to ask in my primary research, right? Just because there aren't any companies out there doesn't necessarily mean, all right, this is a great space to get into. It might be that, other companies have done their customer interviews and there's just no interest, right? So that's certainly important. So what I want to talk about next really is to focus on selecting the right resources. So just broadly speaking, 5 categories of information that I use on a daily basis to kind of support my market research efforts. So the first one, kind of government resources that are usually publicly available, since they're paid for by our tax money, but something like the U.S. Census Bureau, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, industry associations and research centers, which there are a ton of in the United States for every niche industry or sector you can think of. Our search engines, obviously, like your Google, your Bing, your DuckDuckGo, if you are very concerned about your privacy. News databases, aggregators like Effectiva, LexisNexis. And then our full-blown market research report providers, something like a BCC Research and IBIS World. And I'm going to speak more about these in a minute. So this is the UNC business section of the digital library. They're currently, I think it says 72, there's 74 on there right now. So these are all the databases that are somehow related to market and business research. Don't want to scare you. You're not going to use all 74 of these. Honestly, I'll probably use about 10 of these. And it will also obviously depend on the type of company that you're working with, the kind of project that you're supporting. And on this, one thing I do want to mention, which is really important, all of these that are on listed on this site, they are subscription databases. So UNC is paying for these and they cost a lot of money. If you are working with a company or for a company that is non-UNC affiliated directly, then you cannot share full text articles or reports that you find on here. You're going to have to summarize and or cite your resources. Do you want to point that out, because that's really important, because otherwise it'd be a contract violation, copyright infringement. So first thing I look at are, is there a full-blown market research report that kind of corresponds to the industry or kind of the product category that I'm working in? Why do I do that? Well, these are usually really comprehensive, and I can find a ton of data on what's the size of the market, right? On a global or regional scale. What are drivers of the market? What external, internal factors contribute to industry growth? Is there anything that might cause the market to contract, to shrink? What are my market segments, right? What do my customers look like? What are their preferences? Where are they located? Where are my markets? And then what does the competitive landscape look like, right? Again, what kind of companies are already out there? What kind of products do they offer? What are they good at? What are they not so good at? What do their products cost? Who are potential partners, licensees for my technology? And lastly, what does the supply chain look like? Often underestimated, but there might be existing agreements between market incumbents, key suppliers that could create a barrier for us to enter a market. So a lot of potentially very in-depth and solid information you can glean from that. So some examples based on, I guess, the types of industries that you might find yourself working with. And I believe a lot of you guys will be working more in the life sciences and technology space. BCC Research and Frost & Sullivan are probably going to be your go-to sources. BCC is really focused on markets driven by advances in science and technology, whereas Frost & Sullivan is focused on more of emerging high-tech markets, includes a lot of healthcare medical devices, but you also find reports on sensors, drone technologies, and things of that nature. If your research is not really focused on life sciences technology, I would recommend looking at IBIS World, Mintel, Academic, and Passport GMID. IBIS World doesn't really have a particular industry focus. They cover a wide range of industries. You'll find anything from public schools, language instructions, all the way to garbage collection and recycling. Mintel and Passport also cover a pretty wide range of industries, but they are heavily focused on fast-moving consumer goods industries, fashion, just consumer categories in general. I want to give you a quick idea of what the search on BCC Research looks like. So first of all, kind of the categories that they cover, the industries. So you find advanced materials, biotech, healthcare, some IT stuff, manufacturing, all the way to semiconductor manufacturing. So really focused on high-tech, science-driven industries. And I had to put in an example search here just for DNA, just to give you an idea of what the kind of subcategories are that you find on here. So DNA sequencing, DNA vaccines, to viral vector and plasmid DNA. So really broad, very specific within those different categories of industries that they cover. So in comparison, when I look at IBIS World and I type in health, it's really more, it's less about the technology aspect of health, but more about how the industry is set up more broadly, right? So you find stuff in healthcare, social assistance in the US, gym, health and fitness clubs, health and wellness spas. Another example, this is from Passport, kind of see the categories that they cover, very focused on consumer industries, anything from alcoholic drinks, fresh food, soft drinks, to luxury goods. The search strategies on these, the kind of keywords you use, they are mostly the same, but I would highly suggest just kind of logging in and just start playing around with it. It's pretty self-explanatory in how the search actually works. So one thing I do want to mention, if you do find one of these reports that really, they're spot on, they cover your industry perfectly, don't just stop there. First of all, we don't want to just single source our information. And also keep in mind that, these reports are a snapshot of an industry at a certain point in time. Markets are very dynamic, especially the high-tech markets, and things have likely changed somewhat between when the report came out and today, especially with what's going on right now with COVID-19. So we need to update the data that we found. Now, the first category that I like to update is my company news or company. The list of companies that I created. So, there might be new competitors that have emerged, or, the companies that I found in the report, they might have come up with new product lines, what have you, right? So I kind of want to get a better understanding of what's going on in that space. LexisNexis or Nexis Uni, which is the university branded product by LexisNexis, is really great for looking up companies you're already aware of. You can put together these company dossiers that include anything from what kind of products the company offers to who their customers are, and a list of recent financials if it's a public company, as well as recent news. So that's really useful. Reference USA is really more if you're trying to get a sense of all the companies that might exist in a given industry. You can easily search by industry name or category, and it'll give you a list of companies. You can sort by amount of revenue that they had the previous year, how many employees they have, things of that nature. Orbis is another great source of information for both public and private companies. It's kind of an aggregator. It looks at over 100 different providers, but also very, very useful if you already have a specific list of companies in mind that you want to look up. You get very in-depth information on the kind of products that they offer and who their customers are. And last but not least on this, CB Insights, actually one of my favorites. They're heavily focused on startup financing in new and emerging industries, but really good for finding kind of brand new companies that may not have received much coverage yet, or you might not even find in a Google search necessarily, because they might still be kind of in stealth mode. So especially for our life sciences and tech industries, it's a really useful database to kind of find companies that are under the radar somewhat. And the other piece of this, since it's focused on startup financing, it's also a great source for identifying potential funders that are interested in certain industries or products. So I mentioned the, excuse me, I was looking at the wrong slide. So another way to kind of update your company, your list of companies, your potential competitors, is by running a search on some of the business news and aggregators that we have. So Factiva, Nexis Uni, and ProQuest are all great for that. They cover newspapers, industry journals, and PR releases. And you'll find anything that might be behind a paywall on some of those large publishers like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and similar outlets. And one other thing I would recommend, setting up Google alerts around certain industries or companies. You can get daily, weekly updates straight to your inbox. I have way too many of those set up right now because I work with so many different industries and companies, but certainly a great way to kind of stay up to date on what's happening in the industry and around specific companies that you're interested in. Also, if I can ask you to mute yourself, I keep hearing some weird buzzing sounds. Okay, I mentioned earlier there's an association or research center for really any kind of industry or niche sector that you can think of. Easiest way to find these is kind of run a Google search and combine your industry, product name, and add the word association. These are really, really great sources of market data and stats that you likely won't find anywhere else, since they're highly focused and very specific, highly focused on a specific market or industry. Data is often available for free. Sometimes you do have to sign up for a membership. I have done that in the past, but if you have to pay a couple $100s to do that, I would still highly recommend it. But as I mentioned, most of them do have some data available for free as well. Just to give you a quick idea, I did this search earlier just to give you a sense of how broad or how different these associations are. So the Digital Therapeutics Alliance, for instance, represents the interest of developers software to prevent, manage, or treat medical disorders or diseases. The Association for Addiction Professionals is, I think, pretty self-explanatory. So is the National Waste and Recycling Association, but just give you a sense that there really is one for every kind of industry or niche sector you can think of. But all of these provide a wealth of insights into their respective fields, so really useful. Kind of the last category that I like to update, I want to get a better sense of my demographics, my customer base, and update my industry stats. So what do you want to ask yourself is kind of where and how many shifts and trends and what the impact is on my business. So what do I mean by that? Guess I'll give you an example. Let's assume we have a product that targets specifically folks aged 15 to 21. So, more of the youth market for sure. So if you look at Japan, for instance, they have about 127 million people in the country, and the current share of the population age 15 to 21 is pretty large, right? But the overall population, when you look at population trends, they're rapidly aging. So, there will be a lot fewer people in that age group over time. So we need to be mindful of developments like that. And to see, what the potential impact for a business is right now or in the future, right? So the market would be good right now. I can still sell a lot of product to Japan, but, I need to be mindful of shifts in the market. And, if this is indeed your product market or your age group for your demographic, I would probably look at India, where the development is exactly the opposite. And there's 1.3 billion people in the country. So some great sources for information on the U.S. The U.S. Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics are both really great sources for data about people in the U.S., businesses, and the economy in general. Simply Analytics, also Simply Analytics and Statista are both available on the business section of the UNC library that I pointed out earlier. But Simply Analytics combines data from both the Census Bureau, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and a bunch of other sources, and lets you build kind of customized maps of the U.S. based on the qualifiers that you choose. So it'd be a really nice way to show visually where your customers or beneficiaries live, or could be actual customers, or could be businesses that you target, right? Statista is another great source. It has statistics in the name, but really focused on industry stats as well as consumer opinion research, and they cover about 170 plus industries right now. If you're targeting international markets, there's a range of different resources out there. United Nations has a lot of good commercial as well as country guides available on their website. The World Health Organization, lots of useful information on disease prevalence, incidence rates around the world. There's a World Bank. Another organization that I used to work with before I joined the university, or didn't work with them, but in collaboration with them, was the U.S. Foreign Commercial Service. They are represented in almost every country that the U.S. does trade with, or has, at least trade relationships that are somewhat important. But what they have on their website is they have these commercial guides that kind of talk about how to do business in certain countries, what to keep in mind if bribery is an issue, and things of that nature. There's a World Trade Organization, which is pretty self-explanatory. And then one of my personal favorites, actually, the CIA World Factbook. They provide pretty comprehensive country guides with detailed info on demographics, politics, business environments, as well as overall safety in a specific country, since it's the CIA. And that's what I got.
All righty.
How are we doing in time?
So you did good on time. As I mentioned, unfortunately, this particular Lunch and Learn is going to have to be cut short. We were made aware of a webinar or webinar that the Chancellor is hosting for all staff members at 12:30. So we did not know about that, didn't have that planned. So what I would like to do is, one, ask Patrick if he could share this, this presentation so that you could have all of those links that were provided.
Yeah.
Quick question though, just a kind of poll. How many of you have utilized any of these databases and market research in the past? You just kind of, if you're, so we got, of the people that are shown, we have one or two. So, and I tried to do a poll. I was going to do a poll to ask, and maybe what we'll do is in the future, do a poll to kind of just dive into whether or not you've utilized these type of resources. And if so, which ones have you utilized? If you haven't, I'd love to better understand how throughout the next couple of months, if you do end up using it, how helpful they've been for you, things of that nature. So really just want to keep that dialogue open as you're kind of going through the consulting opportunities to better understand how you're utilizing all of the material and resources, and whether or not they're effective for you, not effective for you, whether or not you learned something new, you already knew what you knew, because this is a pilot. And we're looking to do this again in the fall. So the more that we can learn, you're our guinea pigs, if you will, the more that we can learn now through this experience, the better we can make it for your peers.
And I do want to mention, happy to kind of walk you guys through, specific examples based on the companies that you're working with. It's really hard to make these types of presentation. You can't target them because it really depends on the industry, the product, the resources you end up using. But based on my experience working with, all these different companies over the years, and those are definitely kind of your first go-tos. But again, there's others that are probably important that I can help you kind of point out outside of the ones that I mentioned.
Sounds good. So we'll send this market research presentation to you. In 2 weeks, we will be hosting another one of these. Chris Morrison is going to be joining us, and he's going to dive into the primary research. So what we wanted to do was give you a glimpse of what the secondary research looks like. As Patrick mentioned, a lot of times, depending on where your customer is in their journey, as far as the stage that they're in, they may have already done some research. They may be looking at a different market that they want to investigate. So a secondary research would be really appropriate as a first step. And then the next step would be more of that primary research. So you could actually, a project that I've seen a ton of times, and you guys may have done them as well, is helping somebody determine whether or not a market is good for their product. That secondary market research could be a first step, and that could be a project that's, maybe a week and a half long, 2 weeks long. And then that information could filter nicely into identification of customers that you could then go and do primary research on. So our next step and our next Lunch and Learn workshop is going to be in 2 weeks at the same time, and we'll welcome Chris. But I want to thank Patrick for giving us an overview as on the secondary research. We'll send the presentation out to you within the next 24 hours or so. And his information is on that last slide. As he mentioned, he's available for questions. One, on the general research, and two, as you dive into any projects, either through Kickstart or Blackstone Entrepreneurs Network, please use him as a resource. Thank you very much. And again, we apologize for having to cut it short. You gained a half hour to your day, and you can maybe go grab some lunch.